All right, awesome. Myself quickly, my name is Matthew Nason. I'm a junior in Saybrook and the vice president of the Yale Entrepreneurial Society, and I have the privilege of being joined here today by Linda Rottenberg. Linda graduated from Harvard in 1990 with a degree in social studies, but then Yale Law School in 1993. And then in 1997, Linda co-founded Endeavor to provide entrepreneurs around the world with the resources to bring economic and social gains to their communities. With Linda as CEO, Endeavor has supported 2,600 entrepreneurs from over 40 countries who have collectively generated 4.1 million jobs and $67 billion in revenues annually. A New York Times best-selling author, Linda has advised everyone from unicorn founders to prime ministers. Today, she's here to share her insights with you. Please welcome Linda Rottenberg.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I have to say, I've witnessed the evolution of Tsai CITY. It's been great to be here since the inception and work with Claire and others. And I am a proud advisory board member of Yale Ventures and see Josh around in back. And so excited about everything going on in innovation and entrepreneurship at Yale, all the accelerators. And for our part, we hire. Last year we hired 5 Yale summer interns,
nice.
and Mark and Gitika, are you here still? I have 2 members of my team who work here. If not, then Claire has their info. They're going to be doing coffee chats if there's anybody who's interested in interning, or full-time jobs.
Phenomenal. All right, so let's start off by having you tell us a little bit about how Endeavor came about. Walk us through your thinking in terms of your career choices, how you viewed the world, and was there ever like an aha moment for you, and then how did you proceed from there?
Yeah, that's okay. So I'll bring you back to 1993 when I was at Yale Law School, and I was the only one in my class who didn't either want to go into politics. I'd gotten burned out from Harvard Students for Dukakis. That didn't go so well. So burned out from politics, or they thought they were going to do national level politics or become Supreme Court justices. And I rolled my eyes, and the joke's on me because 3 of my classmates I overlapped with were Chris Coons, Michael Bennett, and Cory Booker.
Wow.
And Brett Kavanaugh was just a year ahead before I joined. So, and my good friend Van Jones obviously does politics for CNN. So I was the person who had no idea what I wanted to do. And my Yale law professors, led by Owen Fiss, who's still at the law school, took pity on me and sent me down to Latin America to actually, with this little stipend, to do some work for Yale and to show how long ago this was. I was supposed to help the first interdisciplinary law and business school evolve in Latin America and Argentina and these linkage programs and report back weekly to Owen Fiss. And apparently I am known in the law school for racking up the highest phone bills, because this was even before people started using the internet. So I did that. I ended up going to work for an organization called Ashoka that was built as a venture capital firm for social entrepreneurs and nonprofits. And I thought, this is now 1995. It's Yahoo and Netscape and Steve Jobs returning to Apple. And I thought, where are the business entrepreneurs? Why isn't there venture capital here? And no one knew what I was talking about. And I had 2 aha moments, both in Latin America where I was living. One was in a taxi where my driver had an engineering degree. And I thought, oh, surely you must be and I couldn't think of the word, and neither could he, because there was no word. So the word empresario meant big business leader with, Swiss bank accounts and government connections, and there was no word at that point for entrepreneur. And I thought, wow, no wonder people can't go tell their parents their crazy idea. There's not even a word for it. And I'll get to the second point, but one of my favorite moments at Endeavor came about 8 years later, when the editor of the Brazilian Portuguese dictionary called up our team and said because of Endeavor, they were adding the words empreendedor and empreendedorismo into the lexicon, which is pretty cool.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is. Well, crazy is a compliment. That's my motto. And the second aha moment, which was related, was I was in Brazil and I told the story of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak starting Apple Computer, and a kid came up to me and said, look, that's a nice story, but how does it relate to my life? In Latin America, no one's going to give me money for my crazy idea, and I don't even have a garage. So this stories and iconic, openings that we grew up with, we took for granted. I thought, wow, there's a real need for role models. So that was really the idea at the beginning of Endeavor, was can we show that high growth, what we call high impact entrepreneurs, can exist and create that role model effect. That was the opening.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds phenomenal. So then let's talk a little bit about Endeavor itself and dig into what it's been doing.
Yeah.
So what is especially important about working in these emerging markets globally and domestically as well to support founders that are seeking to scale? And how has Endeavor's impact changed these entrepreneurial ecosystems?
Yeah, great question. So this week, actually Friday rather, so last week, we officially launched our 45th country, Endeavor Ukraine. So Endeavor Ukraine launched on Friday. We have a team in Kyiv, and then we have a diaspora group of board members, which is amazing. And so today we operate, in really every sort of corner of the globe. And what we do is we not only invite the best entrepreneurs to become part of Endeavor through a selection process that takes about 6 months to a year, and so everyone gets this seal of approval who is Endeavor, but then we invite them into a peer network of people who've been through similar challenges as they're scaling. They can access new markets, any of these 45 countries, and we'll get into later, but we have a co-investment fund as well. But what's really interesting, and we'll talk about the fund, and we'll talk about it all, that's what I thought people would believe is
Right.
the most important thing we do. Okay, access to funding, now we co-invest, markets. And it turns out it's not. It's, number one, it's a trusted network and a safe space where people can share their ups and their downs. Oftentimes, we have now 80 of the world's unicorns, the people who've grown up to be billion-dollar companies. In 15 of these markets, they're the very first. They have almost no one to talk to.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing they say. And the second thing is Endeavor has always had a tradition of helping entrepreneurs pay it forward. And we've coined something called the Endeavor multiplier effect. We're actually tracing how ecosystems evolve based on successful founders investing in, mentoring, and inspiring the next generation. It's sort of the PayPal mafia effect, right?
Right.
And just to go back to my original story and give a concrete sort of example, I'll use Argentina, which was their first market. So one of the earliest companies, founders we ran into was a kid named Wences Casares. He'd grown up on a sheep farm in Patagonia and had an idea to start what was going to be the E-Trade. And everyone's like, no, who are you, kid? I don't know you, don't know your last name. He was turned down by all 34 investors in Argentina. Wow. And we met him and we said, you're onto something. We put him through our selection process. We got him a COO. I joke that he got the full service Endeavor because he married my assistant, Belle. And then 18 months later, he sold Patagon to Banco Santander for $750 million. Today, that would be $1.2 billion, okay? And suddenly, every investor calls us up and said, wait a minute, you got another kid with an crazy idea? And two of the people who listened to him, who were inspired by that story, were these Stanford Business School graduates who went to create the eBay. They were going to stay in Silicon Valley, and they said, wait a minute, if Wences can do it, I can too. They created something called Mercado Libre, became an Endeavor entrepreneur, and went public. And today, Mercado Libre is the highest valued company on the continent of Latin America. It's a $100 billion market cap company. And they in turn inspired and invested in several more companies. So today, if you look at Argentina, which by all accounts has had ups and downs in terms of its currency, in terms of its political situation, they've spawned some of the biggest tech success stories really in the world, several decacorns and this one centacorn at $1 billion. But more importantly, that group of people is on the board to mentor and to invest in that next generation. So if the next generation says, wait a minute, there are people who look like me, who will do it. There are women too, by the way, I'll have stories later, and then who will actually support me. So that's really what we're doing, is building ecosystems.
Right. So a huge part of what you guys are doing is getting the ball rolling and then keeping it going with the multiplier effect and making sure that happens. Right.
Yeah, of by 4 entrepreneurs. So we started, they have to continue it. Exactly.
Of course. So let's go back to, you mentioned Ukraine briefly.
Yes.
So what challenges has Endeavor faced in getting started in new countries and markets, particularly those in unstable regions of the world like Ukraine? And then how do you establish those local touch points and networks to get everything started?
Yeah, these are all really thoughtful. And I was we were asked in 2011 to go to Greece. Speaking of prime ministers, the prime minister of Greece, who I had gone to college with, had been a venture capitalist, and when he became prime minister, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, whose daughter is a Yale, she also saw the light, didn't want to go to Harvard, and Daphne, and so Kyriakos called and said, we need Endeavor in Greece. And I was like, well, we were emerging markets. And he's like, no, trust me, Linda, we need this. You can help jumpstart the tech ecosystem here, which we have.
Yeah.
And so I went on Squawk Box, and Andrew Ross Sorkin says to me, Linda, if you were going to launch Endeavor in Europe, why in God's name would you start in Greece? And I said, well, Andrew, when economies turn down, entrepreneurs turn up.
Right.
And that's really been our case. And that's, when you look at the tech talent now in Ukraine, it's incredible. And it's both the diaspora, but also people staying in Kyiv and the people who will come back when hopefully the war ends. And so to have a place where they can go and know they can actually scale has been key. And just this week, one of the biggest announcements of a Series E investment, so it's a $2 billion event, it's a Series E investment by General Atlantic Partners, is in a female-led software company based out of Turkey. Okay, so Insider, led by this incredible woman, Hande Schillinger, just got this round of investment. It's the second largest investment ever in Turkey.
Wow.
And what's incredible is you would think with Erdogan, with the challenges, that wouldn't be a place. In fact, we've seen incredible exits happening. So that's what I would say is entrepreneurship, and to all of you, I know people are scared about what's going to happen with the election and feeling like, God, the world is a little bit more chaotic and unstable. What I have learned from working with entrepreneurs in emerging markets is that entrepreneurship thrives in chaos. Entrepreneurship thrives in instability. That's when innovation can happen. And so I think all of us who grow up in this more stable environment really are well served to learn and lean into these sort of moments of uncertainty, because that's when really things can happen.
Absolutely. And it's clear that Endeavor really has researched and set the precedent for what it takes to build these ecosystems of innovation. Just making sure that there's mentorship and networks and quality of peers and angel investing. What advice have you given to world leaders like your friend and the Prime Minister of Greece, or just company leaders who want to encourage their people to be innovators? And why does that matter to them?
Yeah, look, I think that the great world leaders understand that the boundaries of the world are disappearing. And I think that it used to be that entrepreneurship and innovation was seen as a Silicon Valley dominated thing. And then it was just Silicon Valley in China. I mean, I went on, my good friend Reid Hoffman, who's on my board, had me on, I was on his original Masters of Scale podcast. And he literally said, well, outside Silicon Valley in China, there's no other place of innovation, right, Linda?
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that's really what people still believe today. And we're seeing entrepreneurs from so many countries. And I think that the world, we just had this week in Saudi Arabia, people from all over the Middle East, right, coming. And I think that people are going to be surprised when they realize that it's not just people taking eBay and E-Trade and bringing it to their parts of the world. We're seeing innovations happening in the rest of the world that are going to be replicated here and elsewhere. Just as one example, in Brazil, David Velez started a company called Nubank that's really considered the best digital banking platform in the world. And a lot of people are now bypassing traditional banks and going to traditional banking. People using, one of our companies from Poland, 11 Labs, is the leading voice AI company in the world. So I think that what I would say to them is, you don't have to be in Silicon Valley, but you have to create a center of innovation. Whether you're a company, whether you're a country, you have an opportunity to really inspire and galvanize the talent, and those are where the jobs of the future are going to be.
Right.
So let the entrepreneurs, not everyone's going to be an entrepreneur, but I think that being able to be trained to maybe work for and with an entrepreneur, this is what I think we all need to learn how to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a tremendous amount of value in that. And so I want to touch upon quickly Endeavor Catalyst, which is, you guys founded this in 2012, the investment arm of Endeavor, with soon to be $850 million under management.
Yeah, currently 540. We're raising
currently
another 300 next year, but yes, we will come back next year.
Very optimistic. And then how has beginning this and creating an investing relationship with Endeavor entrepreneurs
Yeah.
changed that dynamic between your org and the people you're supporting?
I love, that's really interesting the way you phrased that. I love that because that was a worry. We sort of said, look, if we're the mentor capitalist, that's what Tom Friedman called us, and if now, and we always prided ourselves on being on the side of the entrepreneur.
Right.
So how would investing change that? And what's really interesting is anyone who wants to be an entrepreneur, who your partners are matter and who your investors are matter. And oftentimes the people who invest in the early rounds, they want to get out, they want an exit, and the entrepreneurs are still motivated to keep going. I'm on the board of, I'm a fortunate board member of Noah Glass at Olo, and Noah is like, it's still day one, it's still day one. And that's awesome. And so I think sometimes you actually have to have difficult conversations with your investors about getting them off the cap table or saying, hey, my original partner left, we need to bring in new talent, we need new stock option pool. And interestingly, Endeavor being on the cap table has allowed us to help our entrepreneurs more, not less. So not only are we able to make returns for the limited partners, but also 50% of the profits go to Scale Endeavor, the nonprofit.
Wow.
So the goal is the nonprofit will be fully self-sustaining by the returns of the funds, which is pretty amazing. But we've been able to do it in a way that's still entrepreneur first.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. Awesome. So clearly things have changed a lot in the last 20 years of working on Endeavor. And I want to know a little bit more about just yourself personally, how your journey doing it, and what was your level of satisfaction and pride or motivation in the days when Endeavor was just starting out? And how does that compare to your work and lifestyle now, and which have you preferred?
Well, now I'm an empty nester. My twins are sophomores here, so I travel a lot more, I would say. That's one thing that's changed. I mentioned that my motto is crazy is a compliment, and I started it because at the beginning, anyone who has an idea, you will be called crazy by your family, by people who, you're trying to get to support you some way or another. But I always say, if it were easy, then somebody else would have done your idea. So I actually took as a challenge the fact that people thought this was impossible. What are you talking about? There'll never be an entrepreneur in an emerging market.
Yeah.
I was literally told that. It seems absurd today, but that was what we were told. They'll never grow, or if they are, they're never going to grow.
Right.
No one's going to invest in them, right? And so that's the first thing I would say is being called crazy when you're starting something new is a good thing. If you're not, then you're not thinking big enough. So that's my first. I then think, it gets a little hard to keep yourself motivated, but I think one of the things I changed as a leader was I thought, particularly as a female leader, I thought, boy, I don't want to be too vulnerable. I think I'll scare people off or freak people out. And my husband, when my girls were 3, developed an osteosarcoma, a rare bone cancer. If you've seen The Fault in Our Stars, it's the not good one.
Yeah.
And so I had to basically go to every chemo session. I did not travel that year. And when I sort of came back in to the office, I was asked a question, and I just broke down. And I went to my office, and I thought, uh-oh, I freaked them out. They're all going to leave. And instead, I got a knock on the door, and these 2 of my team members came and said, look, Linda, we used to think you were superhuman, and they did not mean this in a good way. And they said, now that we've seen you and that you're authentic, now we'll follow you anywhere.
Yeah.
And so I think what I learned is that it's more important it's human. So it's less super, more human is what I tell myself.
Awesome. That's super cool. And so let's talk a little bit about the people that you've worked with. What are examples of entrepreneurs that you've met who you really thought were just super impressive or just particularly exceptional, and what made them so exceptional?
I'm lucky. I still meet every entrepreneur that comes through one of our international selection panels. And so I get to see, people from all over the world. So I was just yesterday with someone from Nigeria, and then Colombia and Poland and Dubai. So what I would say they all have in common is they can't not do what they're doing. they're not people who've reversed engineered a PowerPoint.
Right.
They're solving a real pain point. And I think that's the other thing, if I have advice to all of you guys, is that's when again, why do you want to follow someone? It's if they believe so deeply in what they're doing, that you believe so deeply in what they're doing. They believe they've solved this problem that's really big. You want to believe them. And that's what I love about the Endeavor entrepreneurs. They're not just trying to, as I said, when I've been in Silicon Valley, people are sometimes, well, this is my reverse engineered IPO that's going to get you, $1 billion. In fact, I'm like, well, wait a minute, what are you actually doing?
Right.
and so that's the thing that motivates me. And then the people who know it's going to be hard. Noah here has this phrase, embrace the suck, right? It's going to be hard. Entrepreneurship is not easy. It's not a quick win. There are ups and downs, and be prepared for, battling through. And that's why also I'm so lucky. I love my team members, right? You're spending a lot of time with these people. Who you bring on board, who you surround yourself with, really, really matters.
Yeah, phenomenal. And speaking of people that you've worked with, you mentioned Noah. And we recently had the privilege of hosting Noah here, along with Will, the founders of Olo, who explained that you've been a great mentor and supporter of his journey. And I asked Will when he was here, what is something that I should ask you that I wouldn't necessarily think to ask? And he recommended that I ask you, just given what a well-traveled person you are, what has been your favorite country to visit and work in?
Interesting. I had never been to Indonesia, so Jakarta, as well as, obviously Bali is really fun, but Jakarta, I was surprised. It's just an incredible country with so many different islands, and what's going on is so fascinating, and it's so big and so important, and yet we know so little. In fact, one of my favorite Endeavor companies is the first aquatech unicorn in the world. So he's helping these fishermen. Actually, they sell their shrimp to legal seafood because he's helping them create with these Internet of Thing, devices, help them understand how to make their feed, be more accurate, so they accurately feed all the fish. Anyway, that's only in Indonesia because they are such an aquaculture culture. So I love that. I obviously have a sweet spot for Buenos Aires because I worked there, so I will stick with that one in terms of work.
Very cool. My family is actually from Buenos Aires, so
oh, really?
I very much endorse that opinion. But speaking of mentorship,
I didn't know that. I wasn't just playing to
no, of course not. But I'd love to learn a little bit more about who was a mentor to you at the early stages of your career when you were at Harvard and Yale specifically.
Look, I was very lucky that people, as I said, they found me an odd duck that I didn't want to do something traditional, and so they helped me find my way. And then one of the people I actually stalked. My other theory is that stalking is an underrated startup strategy. And the late, great Peter Brook, who was the founding father of international venture capital. He founded TA Associates, and then he founded Advent International, so really also one of the private equity firm founders in the world, was speaking at Harvard Business School. And I knew all those HBS folks were going to be, getting to him on stage. And I saw him to go to the bathroom. So I walked downstairs and I sort of pounced on him. And I sort of explained what I was doing. And he said, okay, well, come visit me. And I explained to him that actually one of my mentors, who had been a professor of entrepreneurial finance, he still is, at Harvard Business School, Bill Salmon, was interested. He said, well, Salmon's interested? Wait a minute, then come see me. And so I saw him. So then I walked up to Bill Salmon. I said, oh, Bill, Peter Brook just is going to be, he's going to be join our global advisory board. Would you like to join? And he's like, Peter Brook's going to do that? Sure. And then when they hosted for the third year in a row, everyone else sort of was saying they're there because of the two. And they asked, how do we actually say yes to this?
That's awesome.
But he ended up writing a chapter about Endeavor in his own book. So he was. What is great about mentorship is reverse mentorship both ways. He was someone who taught me so much, and yet what he would say also is he had gotten away from his roots in venture and was doing more private equity, and so he felt like Endeavor kind of re-energized him. So I would say that when you have these mentors, there's so much that you can learn from, they can learn from you, right? You guys are digitally native. You guys have so much to offer, and I love, even with our new employees that we have, they teach me new things every day. So that's, I think sometimes people think mentorship, it sounds like a drag because you're asking them for something.
Sure.
But it's really, if you build relationships, it's a great two-way street.
That's awesome. And so you've worked in so many companies or so many countries that have so many different cultures. And one of the things that I'm wondering is, like, is mentorship, the style of mentorship, is that different based on the different countries that you're going to? Is there, like, do you guys have it down to like a playbook for getting started, or does every country, I assume they have their different challenges and different, even down to the cultural level, but how does that work?
These are great questions. Thank you.
Appreciate
They're
it.
really good. I would have expected more difference. What I would say is there's a generational difference that seems very similar across countries. So I think there's a lot of times our entrepreneurs are the first tech or tech-enabled founders in their countries. So I was just in Lagos, Nigeria a couple months ago. And what's exciting is our entrepreneurs becoming the mentors for themselves, because they realize that if they have seasoned leaders, but who have been in oil and gas or in healthcare or in the banking industry, but don't understand fintech or don't understand, health tech or some of the newer things, they're becoming the mentors themselves. I think that's one of the things that we've been able to do, is create this peer-to-peer network.
Interesting.
To say someone who's been there and done that just a half a step ahead of you is almost better than someone who did something in a just completely different environment.
Right.
And that drive is really the same. And I think there's a universal desire that we're tapping into to pay it forward. I really believe that.
So you're leaving it to the people who know their culture best to kind of let this cascade of mentorship continue?
Well, starting, but then it transcends, because then they're saying, well, wait a minute, the fintech I'm starting in Nigeria, I want to meet David Velez who's Colombian and build this thing in Latin America and Brazil. And then they're like, well, let me take it to the Philippines. And so actually it's become much more cross-border.
Really?
And I would say, I think that people are not siloed by geography anymore. I feel like the people we're dealing with are kind of citizens of the world. They care about their home, their territory, and they want to pay it forward, but they really want to learn from and share stories with people around the world.
Is that something that Endeavor actively encourages, this like international network?
Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool. All right. Let's go back to college and law school quickly, and talk a little bit more about, like, when you were at Harvard and Yale, what were your goals at the time? Like, what did you originally want to get out of a liberal arts education, and how did that change? Yeah, well, I was a social studies major at Harvard, so that's basically like 4 years of DS, right? And I loved it. It was great. I have my shelf of the dead white men, and it was, I loved every minute of that. But most of my friends either knew they wanted to go to business school. One of the premier, hedge fund leaders, Bill Ackman, was one of my closest friends at Harvard at the time. A number of people have gone on to be hedge funds. I didn't want to do that, and so I don't know. At that point, law school, I wasn't going to go to medical school. I hadn't taken any science classes really, except for the physics for poets or rocks for jocks. But I thought that law school. I'd been very serious, as I mentioned, Harvard Students for Dukakis. I worked for the supporting the Clinton campaign, and I got burned out on politics a little bit, and I realized that all of my friends, one of the best things about social studies is I had friends from Kenya and Ghana and Turkey and Greece and places in Latin America, and they seemed so energized. And this was, remember, I graduated in 1990, so we saw the Berlin Wall come down. Yeah. So it seemed like more was exciting going on in the world. So I think that was what I told myself. I wanted to go out into the world, and no one thought, once I went to law school, they were like, oh yeah, you say that, no, you're no. Yeah. And the fact that I did actually go to Argentina after, that's my one piece of advice. I hope everyone here gets to spend some time in another culture. I think it's incredible skill set, and I think I feel like I have such an understanding now of the world, because I've lived in these other places, and that's, I wish I had done more of that, but I really highly recommend it. Phenomenal. And speaking of advice, what advice would you give specifically to women who are interested in pursuing entrepreneurship or venture capital?
Yeah, look, I mentioned this woman, Honda Schillinger, who just raised one of the largest funds for any B2B software in the world. We had a company, fintech company this year in Brazil, sell for $1 billion to MasterCard, both the CTO and the chief product officer, female sisters. I think we're just at the beginning. You have Melanie Perkins of Canva. I think we've gone from a situation where it was very difficult for women to raise venture capital, and female engineers were seen as scarcer. That world's changing, and one of my favorite examples to use is Saudi Arabia. So, as I said, I meet every company founder that's going to go through the Endeavor process. And in Saudi Arabia, every time I meet, there's two guys, and they're starting a tech company, and I ask them the following question: what percentage of your engineering team in Saudi Arabia is female? Mm-hmm. What's the answer? Every single one.
0.
40 to 60%.
Wow.
Every single company. And watch this space. And our managing director, who was one of our Endeavor entrepreneurs, who's now our MD in Saudi Arabia, the first woman in history to be on the board of the Riyadh Economic Development Corporation. She is now telling these women who are the engineers how to then start their companies. Yeah. So I think we're just getting started. That's what I would say. Just go out and be the best entrepreneur you are. Find people you like. And the one thing I will say though is sometimes women. The only thing I would say is I notice that women expect there's like this perfectionist streak we have, and they want everything buttoned up before they go and speak to the venture capitalists. And the guys are like winging it, and they're just like, I'm writing my business plan on the way over to the thing. And they're like, no, unless this is done. So I would let that go a little bit, but I think the more that, look, I don't think venture capitalists are the most innovative people in the world. And I think that they have a lot of FOMO. So I think once there are these stories like Canva, like Insider, which is this Turkish company, like the ones where it's going to come, they're going to have a lot of FOMO, and they're going to start seeing, hey, it's not just the boys in hoodies living in Silicon Valley that I need. That's my pattern recognition. I've got to change what pattern recognition is. So I think the best time to be an entrepreneur for anybody, especially for women, especially for people who are going back outside of Silicon Valley, is today.
Incredible. I want to talk a little bit more about Endeavor's role in the world, and specifically trying to understand, if you could elaborate a bit on what ways it differs from a traditional accelerator program, and trying to understand more about like the scene of what you're doing, because like you're saying, when you started, there was nobody doing this, and now are you seeing more people doing this, and is that something that you could view as a competitor, or not really, because you're all just trying to do good together?
Yeah, I love that. We have offices in the U.S. too, and on one of our boards in the Colorado Northwest is David Cohen, is the founder of Techstars, and he joined because he felt like Techstars, which does really more of the early stage, and we have this with Y Combinator and 500 Startups too. We have partnerships where do their success stories go? Where do their graduates go? And so Endeavor, we really talk about the scale up, not the startup. Right. So companies come to us about 8 to 10 million in revenue that want to become the $100 million company. And how do you do that? And a lot of times when people talk about entrepreneurship, and I know it's very helpful for all you starting out, but it's only about the startup. It's only about product market fit, right? It's only about the beta and the MVP. And I think that when you get later on, and you have issues, you have to fire your co-founder, or somebody doesn't work out, or as I mentioned, your seed investor isn't aligned with where you want to go. Where do you go? How do you change your own role as a CEO? And so that's having that peer network of people who've been there and done that. As I said, that's become one of our differentiators. Yeah. The fact that we have this global fund, Endeavor Catalyst, our fund, has invested in, now it'll be, as we say, 50 unicorns, the companies that, as my colleague Alan says, grow up to be the billion-dollar companies. We're the number one investor in unicorns in the world outside of Silicon Valley and China and India. So more than Sequoia, more than Tiger, more than SoftBank, and we go early. So this recognition we have of, we understand why the Nigerian market is closer to the Mexican market than it is to the Kenyan market. Like we have, like what the Philippines is closer to South Africa and other things. So I think that sort of pattern, that globality of what we do, and then the last is what we call this endeavor multiplier effect, is this idea of paying it forward. And what we say is we're kind of redefining what it is to be successful, right? And that wouldn't it be great if people define their success of how many kind of the mafias, like we talked about the Kareem Mafia and the Rappi Mafia, and that should be the yardstick of success versus just your valuation or your exit.
Absolutely. So I want to make sure that I leave time for Q&A, so I'm going to ask you one more question, and then if you have any closing kind of advice. So what would you recommend to aspiring entrepreneurs like many of the students here who feel an urge to build something but haven't quite found the right problem?
Well, if you don't have a problem, go live life, is what I would say. As I said, I mean, I think that those are the compelling stories, right? When I hear an entrepreneur and something came from something they saw or felt or did, and this might be like, I went and worked for an accountant firm and I was bored, but then I started realizing this accountant's problem, they need software too, they need AI too. Like it can be that, but like it came from a real place.
Right.
I do feel like sometimes just the consultants that were looking for and by the way, I have great friends at Bain and other places, I'm a big fan, but I think that people who really were just looking to, as I said, reverse engineer a solution, it's going to be hard. It's gonna suck, it's gonna be hard. If you don't remind yourself why you're doing it every day, like then it's gonna be hard to wake up. I mean, I feel privileged that every day I'm like, you know what, we can go to Ukraine now. We're in places like Turkey and Nigeria and Brazil and Vietnam and Morocco that are hard, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I'd say. Do something. Imagine the worst day, and do you want to keep going? That's what I would say.
That's awesome. That sounds really, really exciting. And is that like what's motivating you? Like what's next for you on top of mind?
Oh, well, I've just put together what we're calling Endeavor's Vision 2035. And although someone told me it sounded like Project 2025, I didn't know that was. I was more thinking of MBS and Saudi's Vision 2030. I was like, 2030 is taken. We're going to do 2035. But we believe Endeavor will be supporting entrepreneurs in 100 countries. Wow. We believe we will have over 50 of the decacorns, the company that are 10 billion. Today, there's only 50 in the entire world. We believe that there'll be 50 even within Endeavor. We believe that Endeavor Catalyst will have well over $1 billion assets under management, and that Endeavor itself will become self-sustaining based on that, those returns, and that the multiplier effect, this idea of the mafias, this will be the new yardstick of success. That's what we are. That's what we're pushing towards, and that's what keeps us up. Yeah.
Very cool. I'm excited to see it happen. All right. I'm also excited to see if anybody in the audience has any questions that they want to ask Linda. Now is the time. We can take a few questions. Yeah.
All right. So we have someone here.
Thank you. So like a big part of Endeavor's mission is kind of around this global image, right? Of like going around the globe and investing. And my kind of motto in life is everything's political, so I'm going to kind of get into the political. Nativism is on the rise pretty much around the entire Western world, especially in the United States, especially in Europe. So how is Endeavor going to kind of push back on these notions that capital needs to stay within our borders, that we need to be investing within the United States or investing within whatever country the capital is coming from? And do y'all have a plan for if more and more nativist leaders or more protectionist leaders kind of come to power, how you're going to maybe sidestep any future regulations around the exportation of U.S. capital and investment in these foreign countries?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting question. I know China has been difficult now, although some could say it's the best time to invest in China, even if the people who invested a decade ago are going to have temporary challenges to get their money out. I would say two things. One is I just have been talking to our U.S. operations in the last week, and it's so interesting because I was talking to people in Louisville, in Bentonville, Arkansas, in Buffalo, in Chicago, and they want to go global. They want to have the best of America view the world and the best of the world view America. And I think there'll always be people who want to buck the trend, number one. Number two, we had our 100th with these international selection panels. We do now 4 in person and 6 hybrid every year. And we had our 100th in-person international selection panel in Dublin. First time in Ireland. It was an amazing event, and it helps that our board chair in Ireland is the edge of U2. So I don't know if any of you watch U2. So that was pretty cool. So we went and saw all his guitars. But this was right when a lot of the Israel, Hezbollah, Hamas situation was getting inflamed, and we had entrepreneurs from Saudi Arabia, from Lebanon itself, coming from Beirut. We had a company based in Dubai that was creating the first, like the Uber of Iraq. Okay, and then you had Edgar Bronfman Jr., whose father at one point was the World, Jury Organization chair, and he's judging. And it was awesome. And they're like, we want entrepreneurship. It was a way they sidestepped. They're like, we're not political. We're excited about entrepreneurship. We're so proud to be part of an organization where it doesn't matter our race, our religion, our nationality, like we're all here to do good and to create jobs and to show each other how we can scale. And I found it incredibly moving, but that's how I view the world. Like I, every day, see people who are not stopped by what's going on. They're inspired to do more and do better and to disprove the people who would kind of tear us apart or bring us down. That's what I see.
Awesome.
Okay, next question.
Be sure as well to introduce yourself before asking the question. Yeah.
Do you want to say who you are?
Oh, yes. My name's Brock McNeil. I'm a first-year student here, and I'm a first-year liaison with Yes. So.
Great.
Thanks, Brock.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Gary, also first year liaison with Yes. And my question is, what types of factors do you notice in the companies and startups that you end up investing in and working with that just like stand out as like yes, like this is like, if do you guys like check off like some boxes, like what are these like key like factors that you notice that like or show that it's gonna be a standout company potentially, if you have that, or is it like different for each one?
Yeah, we use a triangle. We're focused on the entrepreneur, the business, and what we call the inflection point. So the inflection point for us is have you shown some traction to date, and do you still have an idea that's big enough that you can scale to ideally, eventually $100 million plus? Not overnight, but eventually. Like we want, we don't want it to be a lifestyle business. So you've got to have proof points. But what I would say is earlier, as I said, part of it is what's the problem you're trying to solve, and what's your moat. The one thing that everyone asks, well, 2 things. One is, so what's the moat? What's special? Why you? I don't want to just know why someone buys your product, but who are your competitors and why they're buying your service or product or idea versus somebody else. You got to know that. That's number one. Number 2, one of the things I love to ask people is, all right, if you're let's hypothesize that you're a wild success. We understand that and what that's going to look like. But if you fail in a decade, is it homicide or suicide? And people being able to understand what the problems are within their own organization and how to get around them, what they need help with to scale, versus people are like, oh, everything's perfect inside, it's just, the factor, or no, it's gonna be neither, we're just gonna be the winners. So I think the more people can articulate what's their moat, what makes what they're doing really unique, and have an understanding of the competitive landscape and kind of what their own threats are, but how they can overcome them. I find that very compelling, because then it's people who are willing to learn, who are thoughtful, and yet still have something that I can believe can get big.
Awesome, thank you.
Hello, my name is Masha. I'm a first-year student here, and I'm originally from Kyiv, Ukraine.
Oh, yay!
That's why I was really delighted to hear about Endeavor Ukraine. I'm sure it will definitely bring momentum not only Ukrainian tech, but also to other industries. And my question to you, Lena, you mentioned that Endeavor focuses on scaling up entrepreneurs, but I was wondering whether in your long-term plans, do you consider developing mentorship for pre-seed companies as well, for pre-seed startups?
Second-time founders. So the only time we will invest in or really work with pre-seed companies are when they are second-time founders that we've supported. Otherwise, we're very collaborative with, as I said, the Techstars, the 500 startups, the incubators, the accelerators, the Y Combinators that grow up, and we just feel like our job is to take them. A lot of organizations will take you from 0 to 1, and the 1 to 100, that's our superpower. And so we sort of collaborate with everyone because we know where our superpowers are. It's why also we don't lead any investment, we co-invest. So we're actually building out the ecosystem. So I think knowing where we play sort of on that continuum. But what I would say is also, one of the things, back to your question about what we noticed, somebody who's worked at a high growth startup, what we call like the mafia, the tech mafias, we think gets to scale faster. So I would say going to work for startups, even if you don't know your idea yet, go work for another startup. You'll learn so much, and it doesn't have to be a web scale, the Google, the Meta, the ones who actually proactively come here. That was my big problem, by the way, with Harvard and Yale, is you could get a job at McKinsey, or maybe you could get a job at the top law firms, or now the top companies, now Google. But what happens, where do you go? That's why I feel so strongly that we come on campus at places like Endeavor to recruit. Because it's really hard, but that's what I would say. And by the way, Yale Ventures, there are so many great startups happening in and around New Haven. So in biotech, in health tech, I think this is a great opportunity to get your feet wet and to learn what you like about being in a startup, what you would change, maybe an idea comes to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name is Samuel Vargas. I'm also a first year.
Wow. Wait, how many people are first years here? Okay.
Nice.
How many sophomores? Okay, juniors? Seniors? Interesting.
Go
Okay.
first years.
Go first years.
I think you just touched on it a little bit in terms of saying that we should go work for startups, but for the moment that we do get that aha moment and we find that problem that we want to solve, what do you suggest that we do in order to have a better foundation to be that entrepreneur that can lead a successful business?
Well, look, again, back to plugging Yale and Yale Ventures. There's a lot of accelerator programs here and seed programs. I think it's fantastic. I do think look. Y Combinator, my thing is just don't give too much of the company away. I think they take too much of the company, so I prefer the accelerators that take less of the company personally. But I do think that there is something about being in cohorts where you're with other people who are starting too. You're learning. Put yourself into environments. If you're not going to go work at a startup, if you have the idea, then try to get the seed funding, but try to surround yourself with people who are at the stage you're at and doing it together, or as I said, half a stage beyond, and that sort of mentorship. I don't know if that answers your question.
Awesome. We have time for 2 or 3 more.
We have 3 raised hands now. So
Okay,
That works
last
out.
3, and then I'll stay we're going to go to dinner, but I'll stay for a minute at the in the back if anyone has a personal question they want to ask. Hi.
Hello, my name is Yepsra. I'm a first-year grad student at Yale Divinity School.
Amazing.
And my question, I really like that the pay it forward is something that's central to the company, and I just kind of wanted you to touch a little bit more on that. What are the ways that you measure that? Is that something that the company keeps track of? How do you track social impact?
Well, great that you said this. So entrepreneurs are a competitive bunch, and so one of the reasons why I think people can latch on to what's your valuation, what's your exit, is because it's measurable and you can see if your valuation is bigger than others. So we said, well, wait a minute. What if you could do that? We didn't want it to be nice and touchy-feely, like I'm a mentor, I'm an investor. No, what if we made it like you had serious FOMO if you didn't do it? Mm-hmm. So we actually measure, we have the Endeavor multiplier effect. We take it really seriously and we create these bubbles of influence. So there's bubbles of influence and spheres of impact. And we actually, at both an individual founder level and an ecosystem level, we actually measure based on how many people did you train in your companies that went off and started a second companies? How many people actually say they mentored you? How much investment did you actually give? We're actually developing a website now to take all of this and just, it's been done by a research team, but now we're going to amplify. And so now people go around saying, how big is your bubble? So I think that's part of the goal, is to say, hey, I have more mafia than you out of Robbie. Like, more people have left my company. And by the way, Reed, again, who's a friend, who's part of the PayPal mafia, he's like, oh, don't say mafia. It's the PayPal network. I'm like, own the mafia, Reed. But now if you go to the Middle East, it's the Korean mafia. If you go to Nigeria now, it's the Flutterwave mafia. I mean, this, I think, is amazing because, and then people want to, compete to sort of say, hey, how much should I help them? But it's not done out of guilt. I think like guilt and greed is both kind of extremes. We focus on kind of gains and good, but to make it sort of fun and like people want to do it, I think is really is really what's motivating. Two more, quick. Sorry.
Hello,
Hi.
Linda.
Hello.
Nice to meet you. My name is Vitória Bezerra Nunes. I'm from Brazil. And it's so special to be here, like in this event with you, because one of my greatest mentors in Brazil is Verônica Serra, that is one of the global directors of Endeavor.
Yes.
So I'm a low-income student in Brazil. I'm a 100% scholarship holder here.
Fundação Estudar?
Yeah, I'm from Fundação Estudar. I'm a scholarship holder there, and like, Verônica paid for all of my clothes here. So like this winter coat, she paid for me. So she's so special for me. And like while I was talking with her, like she was talking about like how Brazil is like leading the VC like dollars in Latin America, and how like Endeavor invested like more than $110 million in Latin America. And I would like to ask you, how do you unveil like the next years of Endeavor in Latin America, but in Brazil specifically? Thank you so much.
So exciting, and in fact, I should say that one of my other mentors was Georgia Paula Lehman, who was also Vera's mentor, and the 3G guys, I mean, took over Anheuser-Busch and Budweiser and Heinz, and they're Brazilian, right? Brazilians run these iconic American companies. It's just this amazing story, and they also do Fundação Estudar, which is this incredible scholarship program that's amazing. We love the Brazilian talent. I would say that a decade ago, there were almost no Brazilians who wanted to go outside Brazil. It's the curse of the big country. It's sort of what we also saw in places like Indonesia and Nigeria and Saudi Arabia that are so large. Whereas if you were from Argentina or Chile, or if you're from the Philippines, or if you're from the smaller markets, Jordan, Lebanon, you have to go regional at least. And so I was very frustrated because I found the Brazilians just looking, lo mais grande país do mundo, right? It was true. You could build this great company there. And what's been awesome is the globalization of the Brazilians. And we are now seeing innovations go from Brazil across like to Kenya and to Vietnam. I think that David Velez and the Nubank story is just the first. We actually have 5 companies in Brazil that are scheduling to IPO in the next 1 to 2 years. And in fact, our managing director is now Anderson Thies, who was one of the top VCs, the earliest VCs in the country, and he just joined us full time. So I'm really excited. And what he said to me is, Linda, here's the thing. At 40 countries, Brazil has been a really important part of Endeavor. We've been like 15% of all the companies, all the unicorns. I know we're going to 100, but I don't want that percentage slipping. I still need to be 15 to 20. We can't be like 2%. I was like, okay, that's a good aspiration. I think it's an amazing place. And I think what's exciting when I talk about Pismo, these women who were the CTO and CPO, I think that's the next thing we're going to witness is how I hope there are more women that go into entrepreneurship and that scale big. We have Mariana Gupi too, that's in HR tech. But I think it's one of the places in the world that we haven't heard enough about in terms of innovation, and we're going to. So that's my Brazil plug.
This is the last question.
Last one. Hello.
Hi, good evening. I'm Sharice Rogers. I'm a second-year executive MBA student.
Wonderful.
And my question to you is, well, first I'll start with this statement. So as you all are aware, the funding for venture capital for female entrepreneurs and those from historically marginalized groups are significantly less. So my question to you is, how does Endeavor see this challenge as an opportunity in the U.S. and globally?
Yeah, and I think this is great because it gets back to the original when there wasn't a story, right? There wasn't a word for entrepreneurship. There wasn't a story. And one of the things we're doing now is telling the story of Insider, this Turkish woman who literally raised one of the top Series E's of this year. Who's investing Series E's this year? Nobody, right? It's a $2 billion valuation company. It started in Turkey. One of my favorite Endeavor founders from the U.S. was also a Yale Law graduate, Saint Laurent of Squire Technologies, and I think, and so he and Dave Salvant basically said, we're tired of just being seen as like the top black tech founders. We're just the top tech founders in SaaS, and they actually went to NOAA for mentorship, and they're like, we're expanding to Australia, we're expanding to Canada, but they want to tell their story and they want to reinvest. And I think that one of the things we're seeing, we've worked with a lot of the black tech firms in particular that started after 2020. And we're doing seed and Series A because that's where they're, and I think what's exciting and what we're starting to look for proactively is who's now ready for that Series B, who's now gotten that initial funding and now we can sort of scale up. And I think that, as I said, one of the great things is have entrepreneurs take the funding. This is why we tell women, be founder to funder. Right? I think when you look in Silicon Valley, so much is people leaving companies and them investing in the other business plan. And I think that so not just waiting around for the VCs to get a clue, which they will when we see these awesome entrepreneurs or someone like Tope of Calendly, right? When I think they have a lot of FOMO when they missed somebody, like, oh, who's the next person who does something in that industry or who looks like this profile. I think they're as I said, not the most innovative people in general, the VCs, but that's where find other founders. And that's what I would say, because founder to founder and is, I think, where the source of funding is going to come. And then the more we shine a light on these stories, the more people are going to realize, hey, my view of who a founder is stuck in an old narrative. I have to write, because I may miss the next big thing. Yeah. So, great.
All right, this has been awesome. Thank you so much, Linda. Round of applause.
Thank you all.